Hey, everyone in the presence community, and welcome to today's explainer. Let's just dive right into it, shall we? Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating friction, the tension between our natural, comfortable inclinations and the actual demands of leadership growth. Now, we so often hear that the absolute gold standard of leadership is authenticity. Just be yourself, right? But what happens when being yourself is the exact thing keeping you from stepping into your full potential? So settle in because we are going to completely deconstruct the friction between who you are right now and who you need to become. I want to kick things off with a question that might sound a little counterintuitive at first. Is being true to yourself actually holding you back? Think about it. As you advance in your career, you are naturally pushed way, way out of your comfort zone. The stakes get higher, the expectations completely shift, and suddenly you're required to adopt behaviors that just feel, well, completely unnatural. And because going against our natural grain makes us feel like total imposters, we are incredibly tempted to latch onto this idea of authenticity as a sort of excuse. We retreat to familiar, comfortable behaviors under the guise of staying true to ourselves. But here's the reality check. Sticking to what's comfortable rarely meets the requirements of a demanding new role. Think of this explainer as a bit of a mindset reset, a calm, reflective space for presence rather than getting bogged down in rigid ideology. We are really grounding today's conversation in the insight for alignment principles of presence, discernment, and internal authority. Our goal today is to totally strip away that heavy moral pressure of finding your one true self. Instead, we want to focus on how you can practically manage your presence, genuinely connect with others, and evolve without losing your center. All right, so what exactly is the authenticity paradox? Basically, it happens when a simplistic or overly rigid understanding of being true to yourself actually becomes an anchor. It literally weighs you down and hinders your ability to adapt and grow. And look, it is completely valid and entirely human to feel shaky or even like a fake when a new role demands unfamiliar behaviors, like, say, having to pitch yourself aggressively when you were raised to value quiet humility. But when we view our self-concept too rigidly, that anchor keeps us from sailing forward into the growth we actually need. When we grip that rigid idea of a true self too tightly, we tend to fall into three major traps. Number one, we try to be true to a past self, totally forgetting that we are allowed to evolve. I mean, you can't be strictly true to a future self that hasn't even been formed yet, right? Number two, we mistake unfiltered full disclosure for honesty. Sharing every single doubt or fear can actually, well, honestly, it can drain you and completely undermine your credibility, especially when you're still unproven in a new role. And third, we blindly apply past values to new challenges where they simply no longer fit. For example, a past value like keeping tight control over operating details becomes totally wrong-headed when your new challenge requires you to step back and actually empower your team. So, escaping this paradox, it requires a pretty massive paradigm shift. We're always told that we find ourselves through introspection, looking inward. But actually, too much introspection just reinforces outdated versions of who we are. Instead, we need to cultivate what we call adaptive authenticity through a concept known as outsight. Outsight is that incredibly valuable external perspective we get by plunging into new projects, interacting with completely different kinds of people, and experimenting with new ways of getting things done. Your professional identity is a work in progress. It's shaped by direct external experience and trial and error, not just sitting quietly and looking inward. To bring this down to earth and practically manage our presence, we use the ACE framework. First up, A for assumptions. Start by updating your assumptions about the unique value you bring to the table. This builds the mental confidence you need to avoid slipping into an overly aggressive driving voice. Next is C for communication. You want to elevate this through structured advocacy and deeply active listening, going way past the surface level to uncover hidden emotional agendas. And finally, E for energy. Develop a deep self-awareness of the physical and emotional energy you're projecting. Maintaining a calm, stable equilibrium balances your strength with warmth. It reassures your team and, crucially, makes others far more receptive to your influence. Now, how do we actually pull this off without feeling completely overwhelmed? Here's the key. You have to cultivate a playful frame of mind. Adopting an adaptively authentic approach means you start treating leadership development as trying on possible selves. It absolutely should not feel like some grueling, heavy personality makeover. When we adopt a playful attitude, we open ourselves up to so many possibilities. We can experiment with a new communication style, or maybe a totally new way of running a meeting, just to see what fits. And we can do it without that nagging anxiety that we're somehow violating our deep moral core. This brings up a super interesting distinction in psychology. true to selfers versus chameleons. True to selfers tend to express exactly what they think and feel, even when it completely runs counter to what the situation actually demands. The huge danger there is sticking way too long with comfortable behaviors that actively block your growth. Adaptively authentic leaders, on the other hand, act a bit more like chameleons. Now, they don't fake it with wholesale imitation. Rather, they act like a chameleon by selectively borrowing specific styles and tactics from diverse role models. Maybe they borrow using humor to break tension from one mentor, or shaping opinions quietly behind the scenes like another. They pull these pieces together to create a unique collage that perfectly suits their changing circumstances. Let's talk about another absolute game changer of a mindset shift, working on getting better rather than just looking good. When leaders focus strictly on performance goals, they are stuck in a mindset of proving themselves. They're striving to present flawlessly all the time, and as a result, they are completely terrified of taking risks. But if you shift to learning goals, the whole picture changes. Your motivation becomes about improving yourself and developing new attributes. You can experiment with your identity. You can try out that new presentation style without feeling like a massive imposter if you don't get every single detail perfectly right from the very start. Think about your own personal narrative for a second. Professor Dan McAdams points out that identity is an internalized and evolving story. So often, we as leaders use defining moments from our past to guide us. But those old stories, they can become incredibly outdated. Maybe your story is, I'm the hands-on operator who fixes everything. But now, you're a senior executive whose job is to set the vision, not fix individual cogs in the machine. To grow, you absolutely must continually edit your story. It's literally like updating a resume. Your narrative needs to align with your desired future self, reflect the actual demands you're facing today, and resonate with entirely new audiences. I really want this next point to sink in because honestly, it frees us from so much unnecessary guilt. Ready? It is completely okay to be inconsistent from one day to the next. Let me just say that one more time. Temporary inconsistency is perfectly fine. It is not a lack of integrity. It's not faking it. Actually, scratch that. It's more like the exact opposite. It is the necessary, responsible, and courageous process of stretching the limits of who you are just so you can discover the absolute most effective way to lead in a brand new environment. Let's just take a beat here. I want to invite you to look inward for a moment and ask yourself a really grounded reflection question. Look at your own career right now. Where is your current definition of authenticity keeping you reactive rather than responsible? Where are you using the excuse of, well, this is just who I am, as a shield to avoid growing? I'm going to give you a moment to just sit with that. As we wrap up this explainer, my invitation to you is gentle, but it's important. Take this evolving sense of self into your daily leadership and into the dialogues you have with your community. Stop trying to protect your comfortable old self from the threats that change inevitably brings, and start actually exploring the leader you might become. Remember, your signature voice is out there. It's literally just waiting for you to piece it together. So, as you step into your next big challenge this week, I'll leave you with this. Which possible self are you brave enough to try on today?